Why was a small woman standing alone on a firing range while 180 warriors laughed at her? What could a butterfly tattoo possibly mean that would silence an entire military base? And why was she trembling? Not from fear, but from restraint. The crack of an M4 charging handle cut through the August heat like a blade through silk. Naval Base San Diego, 180 personnel in formation. SEAL selection candidates with shoulders squared, eyes locked on targets 300 meters downrange. The California sun hammered down, turning sweat into rivers that carved lines through the dust on their faces. This was where warriors were forged. This was where legends were born. But something didn't belong. Instructor Daniels stood 63, all coiled muscle and barely contained aggression. His voice detonated across the deck like a flashbang grenade. Who authorized a tattoo shop to set up business on my range? He was glaring down at a woman half his size. Maya Chen wore navy blue logistics coveralls that hung loose on her small frame. Her fingers gripped a battered metal clipboard so tightly her knuckles had gone white. And there, just visible beneath the rolled cuff of her sleeve, a small butterfly tattoo spread its wings in black ink. The laughter came fast, brutal. A trainee twice her weight jabbed his buddy's ribs and bellowed loud enough for everyone to hear. What's she going to do? Flutter at the Taliban? The mockery spread through the ranks like wildfire through dry grass. Someone whistled. Another voice joined in. Maybe she'll distract them with interpretive dance. Petty Officer Third Class Maya Chen did not respond. She stood motionless, brown eyes fixed straight ahead at nothing in particular, her jaw so tight the muscles jumped beneath her skin. No defense, no explanation, no movement except the slight tremor in her hands that made the papers on her clipboard vibrate. Why wasn't she defending herself? Why did her silence feel heavier than any words could be? Daniel stepped closer, invading her space with the practiced cruelty of someone who knew exactly how to break people without laying a hand on them. His voice dropped to a stage whisper that still carried to every ear on the range. Desk sailors like you don't belong out here with real warriors. You should stick to your paperwork and your keyboards where you can't get hurt. Maya swallowed hard. Her throat worked visibly, her lips parted as if to speak, then closed again. She said nothing. The silence stretched out between them like a wire pulled to its breaking point. Not one person in that formation knew that within 20 minutes, everything would change. Not one of them understood they were mocking the sole survivor of one of the darkest missions in SEAL history. And not even Captain Morrison, watching from the observation tower with his arms crossed and his face unreadable, had any idea that the butterfly on Maya Chen's wrist was not a decoration purchased from some boardwalk shop. It was proof of a secret only 12 living people in the world could recognize. Maya's fingers loosened fractionally on the clipboard. She took one breath, then another, each one measured and controlled. Around her, the laughter continued, but she had already learned to let it roll over her like waves breaking on stone. This was not the worst thing she had endured. Not even close. The hardest part was remembering to seem weak when every instinct she possessed screamed to stand tall and fight back. But fighting back was not the mission. The mission required patience. It required silence. It required her to be invisible while she watched and waited and documented everything. So Maya Chen stood very still with her butterfly tattoo, exposed to the mockery of 180 warriors who had no idea what it meant. And she said absolutely nothing at all. The formation finally broke apart with Daniel's dismissal, his voice sharp with contempt as he waved Maya away like she was something unpleasant he'd found stuck to his boot. She turned without a word and walked back toward the ammunition depot warehouse, her steps measured and careful. The clipboard trembled against her chest, but her posture remained upright despite the weight of all those watching eyes. Behind her, voices continued their assessment with the casual cruelty of people who believed themselves superior. Did you see her hands shaking? Probably never even held a rifle. 3 years in logistics, and she thinks that tattoo makes her tough. Butterflies, honestly, what's next? Rainbows and unicorns. Maya kept walking. Her jaw ached from clenching her teeth, but she let none of it show on her face. The warehouse loomed ahead, a massive corrugated metal structure that housed enough ammunition to level a small city. She shouldered through the personnel door and let it clang shut behind her, finally cutting off the voices and the laughter and the brutal California sun. Inside, the temperature dropped 15 degrees. Shadows stretched between towers of wooden pallets stacked with ammunition crates marked with stenciled warnings in 3 languages. The air smelled like gun oil and cardboard, and the particular metallic tang that came from thousands of rounds of brass-jacketed ammunition stored in close quarters. Maya stood alone in the silence for 5 heartbeats, letting her breathing slow to normal. Then she walked to her small desk, wedged into a corner between 2 ammunition racks, and carefully set down the clipboard. Her hands were steadier now, without an audience watching for weakness. She pulled a pen from her breast pocket and began completing the ammunition count with perfect, precise handwriting that never wavered despite what had just happened outside. Each number went into its designated box on the form. Each calculation checked out exactly. The work was methodical, boring, beneath the capabilities of someone with her training, and absolutely necessary to maintain her cover. This was how she had spent 3 months, counting bullets, filing paperwork, enduring mockery, watching. But watching what? And why would someone with her capabilities accept this humiliation day after day? The warehouse door crashed open with enough force to rattle the metal walls. Maya's hand moved automatically to her hip where no weapon hung, then forced itself back to the clipboard. Trainee Rodriguez swaggered in with 3 of his buddies trailing behind like remeras following a shark. Rodriguez stood 62 and carried 230 pounds of muscle earned through obsessive gym sessions and pharmaceutical assistance he thought nobody knew about. He had cold blue eyes and a smile that never reached them. The kind of predator who had learned early that size and aggression could get him most of what he wanted in life. He stopped directly in Maya's path as she attempted to move past him toward the ammunition racks. His shadow fell across her like a threat. Heading somewhere, butterfly girl. His voice dripped false sweetness. Careful out there on that dangerous journey to count bullets. Real warriors train on that range. Wouldn't want you to get confused and wander into actual danger. His friends laughed on cue. One of them, a trainee named Kowalski with a neck like a tree trunk, leaned against a pallet of ammunition and grinned. Maybe she's writing poetry in that little notebook. Butterfly haikus. Maya stopped walking but did not meet their eyes. She stood with her head slightly bowed, shoulders hunched inward, making herself smaller. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Excuse me, I need to complete the inventory." "You need to complete the inventory," Rodriguez mimicked in a high-pitched mockery of her voice. "What you need is to understand your place, clerk. This is a military base, not some corporate office where you can hide behind a desk and pretend you matter." He reached out and flicked the butterfly tattoo on her wrist with his index finger. The contact was brief but deliberate, a violation of personal space designed to intimidate. Cute ink, though, very intimidating. I bet enemies everywhere are terrified of butterflies. Maya's jaw tightened. Her breathing remained controlled, but something flickered behind her eyes. Something dark, something dangerous. Something she immediately suppressed. "I just want to do my job," she said quietly. The words cost her more than anyone watching could understand. Rodriguez leaned closer, his breath hot on her face. "Your job is to stay out of our way and remember that real warriors are training while you're playing accountant. You want respect. Earn it. Until then, keep your head down and your mouth shut." He shouldered past her hard enough to make her stumble. His friends followed, laughing, their voices echoing off the metal walls as they disappeared deeper into the warehouse to retrieve ammunition for their training exercises. Maya stood alone again, her clipboard pressed against her chest like armor. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear, from rage she couldn't express, from frustration she couldn't release, from the weight of pretending to be weak when everything inside her screamed to fight back. But she had learned patience in places darker than this warehouse. She had learned silence in situations far more dangerous than bullies with fragile egos. She had learned to endure because endurance was its own kind of strength. And she had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing a warrior could do was absolutely nothing at all. 3 months of counting bullets while grown men treated her like a nuisance. 3 months of documentation that nobody thought mattered. 3 months of watching patterns emerge in ammunition requests that didn't quite add up. Small discrepancies, slight irregularities, the kind of details that logistics clerks were supposed to overlook. But Maya Chen had never been just a logistics clerk. She returned to her desk and continued the inventory count. Her handwriting remained perfect. Her calculations remained precise. And in a small notebook hidden beneath the official paperwork, she added 3 more names to a list that was growing longer with each passing day. Rodriguez, Kowalski, and a third trainee whose face she had memorized but whose name she would verify later. All 3 had requested ammunition in quantities that exceeded their training requirements. All 3 had accessed the warehouse during off hours when supervision was minimal. All 3 matched the behavioral profile of individuals involved in the black market ammunition trafficking network she had been sent here to infiltrate and dismantle. They thought she was counting bullets. She was counting evidence. They thought she was weak and frightened and harmless. That was exactly what she needed them to think. Because the moment they realized Maya Chen was not who she appeared to be, the mission would be compromised. The investigation would fail, and the network of traitors operating within this base would scatter like roaches when the lights came on. So she let them laugh. She let them mock. She let them underestimate her while she quietly, methodically, invisibly documented every piece of evidence that would eventually destroy them. That was what real warriors did. They served without recognition. They operated in silence. They endured humiliation when the mission required it. And when the time came, they struck with precision that no one saw coming. Maya finished the inventory count and filed the paperwork with the same meticulous attention to detail she brought to everything. Then she pulled out her encrypted phone, the one that looked like a standard issue device, but contained communications protocols used by only the most classified intelligence operations, and sent a brief message. 3 more confirmed, pattern holding, request timeline for extraction. The response came back within minutes. 72 hours, maintain cover, do not engage. Maya deleted both messages. The phone's security protocol ensured no trace remained. She looked down at the butterfly tattoo on her wrist, at the delicate wings rendered in precise black ink, at the memorial to someone who had believed in her when no one else did, at the coordinates hidden in the pattern that marked her as something these trainees could never comprehend. Sometimes dignity didn't argue. It didn't defend itself. It didn't need validation from people who couldn't see past appearances. Sometimes dignity just waited, patient, silent, unbreakable, ready to prove that underestimation was the most dangerous gift an enemy could give. How many days could someone endure being invisible before they started to disappear? How much mockery could a person absorb before it began to erode who they really were? And what happens when the person everyone dismissed as harmless turned out to be the most dangerous individual on the entire base? Maya Chen woke at 4:30 hours. No alarm necessary. Her body had been conditioned by years of training to operate on minimal sleep and maximum efficiency. The small apartment she rented off base was sparse, functional, Nothing personal except a single photograph on the nightstand that she never looked at but couldn't bring herself to remove. She ran 5 miles before the sun rose. Not the shuffling jog of someone going through motions, but the controlled sprint of someone maintaining combat readiness. Her breathing remained steady. Her pace never varied. People who saw her during these early morning runs assumed she was just trying to stay fit, trying to prove something. They had no idea she was maintaining the physical conditioning required for operations that would break most of them within hours. She returned to her apartment, showered, and dressed in the same loose logistics coveralls that made her look smaller and less capable than she was. She tied her hair back in a simple ponytail, applied minimal makeup, made herself look ordinary, forgettable, harmless. The transformation was so complete that the woman who could run 5 miles at a 6-minute pace and execute close-quarters combat techniques with lethal precision completely disappeared beneath the appearance of a quiet desk clerk who just wanted to do her job without causing trouble. By 6:30 hours, she was back at the ammunition warehouse, her battered clipboard in hand, ready for another day of counting bullets and being treated like furniture. The mockery continued. It always did. Daniels found new ways to humiliate her during morning briefings. Trainees invented fresh insults, each one trying to be more creative than the last. Someone had drawn a crude cartoon on the warehouse wall depicting a butterfly trying to lift a rifle and failing. The artist had even labeled it Maya's military career. She documented it all, not because the mockery mattered, but because the behavioral patterns revealed information about the investigation. The trainees who went out of their way to demean her were often the same ones involved in the ammunition trafficking. The aggression wasn't random. It was territorial. They sensed something about her even if they couldn't articulate what, and their instinct was to drive her away before she discovered too much. But Maya had been trained by people who understood that intelligence work was 90% patience and 10% action. She could wait. She could endure. She could maintain her cover while collecting evidence piece by piece until the case was airtight and undeniable. On the third day of her final week, something changed. Rodriguez returned to the warehouse with his usual entourage, but this time there was tension in his movements. His jokes felt forced. His eyes kept darting to the exits as if he was calculating escape routes. Maya noticed immediately. Years of reading body language and assessing threats had made her sensitive to the smallest shifts in behavior. Someone was nervous, and nervous criminals made mistakes. She continued her inventory count, appearing completely absorbed in the monotonous task, while her peripheral awareness tracked every movement Rodriguez made. He retrieved ammunition for his training session, signed the necessary paperwork, and left. But on his way out, he paused at the door. Just for a moment. Looking back at Maya with an expression she couldn't quite read, suspicion, fear, calculation. Then he was gone, and the warehouse was quiet again. Maya added a note to her encrypted file. Subject Rodriguez displaying anxiety indicators, possible awareness of surveillance, recommend acceleration of timeline. The response came faster than usual. Timeline moved up. Extraction in 24 hours, be ready. 24 hours. One more day of pretending to be harmless while surrounded by people who had spent 3 months treating her like a joke. One more day of enduring mockery while she prepared to tear apart everything they thought they knew about the quiet logistics clerk with the butterfly tattoo. That night, Maya didn't sleep. She sat at her small kitchen table reviewing files on her encrypted tablet, memorizing names and faces and connections. The ammunition trafficking network was larger than initially suspected. It extended beyond just a few trainees stealing rounds to sell on the black market. There were connections to outside criminal organizations. There was evidence of weapons being diverted. There were indications that classified equipment had been compromised. What had started as a routine investigation into missing ammunition had evolved into something far more serious. A security breach that threatened the integrity of the entire base. A network of traitors operating in plain sight while pretending to be warriors. And Maya Chen, the woman they had mocked and dismissed and underestimated, had mapped every connection, documented every transaction, and built a case that would destroy them all. At 5:30 hours the next morning, she ran her usual 5 miles. At 6:30, she showed up at the warehouse with her clipboard. By 700, she was counting bullets while trainees made their usual jokes. Everything appeared normal, routine, boring. Except that morning, Captain Morrison arrived at the ammunition depot with 2 individuals Maya had never seen before. They wore civilian clothes, but their bearing screamed military intelligence. Their eyes swept the warehouse with professional assessment, cataloging exits and potential threats with practiced efficiency. Morrison's face was grim. Clear the warehouse, all personnel out now. The trainees looked confused, but they obeyed. Rodriguez shot one last glance at Meyer as he left, and this time the suspicion in his eyes was unmistakable. He knew, maybe not the details, but he knew something was wrong. Within minutes, the warehouse was empty except for Maya, Morrison, and the 2 intelligence officers. The door clanged shut. The silence that followed felt heavy with impending revelation. Morrison turned to Maya. His voice was carefully neutral. Petty Officer Chen. These are Special Agents Reeves and Martinez from Naval Criminal Investigative Service. They have some questions about ammunition discrepancies you've been documenting. Maya set down her clipboard. Her hands were steady. Her voice was calm. Yes, sir. I have extensive documentation ready for review. Reeves stepped forward. He was tall, thin, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. We've been monitoring your reports, Petty Officer. Your work has been exceptionally thorough, almost as if you had training in intelligence analysis. The statement hung in the air, a question that wasn't quite a question. Maya met his gaze directly. For the first time in 3 months, she didn't hunch her shoulders or make herself smaller. She stood at full height, and something in her posture shifted. The quiet clerk disappeared. What remained was someone else entirely. I do have that training, sir. Extensive training. Martinez pulled out a tablet and showed Maya a photograph. Do you recognize this insignia? The image showed a butterfly rendered in the exact style of Maya's tattoo. Beneath it, coordinates, a date, a mission designation that had never been made public. Operation Neptune's Shadow, Maya said quietly, Kandahar Province, 5 years ago. Morrison's expression shifted from confusion to something approaching shock. Neptune's Shadow was classified above top secret. How would a logistics clerk know that designation? Because I was there, sir. Maya's voice remained steady, but emotion flickered behind her eyes. I was the 8th operator, the one whose identity was classified even from the after-action reports, the one who extracted 6 operators from a compromised facility while under enemy fire, the one who stayed behind to destroy intelligence materials while the facility was being overrun. She pulled up her sleeve, fully exposing the butterfly tattoo. This marks the coordinates where Lieutenant Commander Davis died, covering our extraction. The butterfly represents the promise I made to him before he died, that I would get the rest of the team out alive, that I would never stop serving, even if no one ever knew my name. The warehouse was so quiet Maya could hear her own heartbeat. Morrison looked like someone had just rewritten everything he thought he understood about reality. Reeves broke the silence. You've been operating undercover for 3 months investigating ammunition trafficking, but your real mission was deeper than that, wasn't it? Yes, sir. Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out a small drive. The ammunition trafficking was the entry point. What I discovered was a network of personnel with connections to foreign intelligence services, trainees who were being recruited for espionage, classified materials being photographed and transmitted, a security breach that extended far beyond stolen bullets. She handed the drive to Martinez. Everything is documented. Names, dates, evidence. Enough to prosecute 17 individuals for crimes ranging from theft to espionage. All of it collected while I pretended to be exactly what everyone assumed I was. Harmless, incompetent, invisible. Morrison's hands clenched into fists. These trainees have been mocking you for months. I saw it. I did nothing because I thought. You thought I was just a logistics clerk who couldn't handle the pressure, Maya finished. That's what you were supposed to think, sir. That's what everyone was supposed to think. It's easier to investigate criminals when they don't know they're being investigated. Reeves studied her with new respect. How long have you been doing this kind of work? Since Kandahar. Since I proved I could operate in impossible situations and accomplish missions that officially never happened. I've been embedded in 4 different units over 5 years, always undercover, always invisible, always documenting things that needed to be exposed. And always alone, Martinez said quietly. Maya's jaw tightened. Service doesn't require an audience, sir. It just requires commitment. Morrison's voice was rough with something that might have been shame. I owe you an apology, Petty Officer Chen. I should have seen. You saw exactly what I needed you to see, Captain. The mission required me to be underestimated. You played your role perfectly. No apology necessary. Outside, the sound of vehicles arriving. Multiple vehicles. The rapid, efficient movements of a tactical team preparing for arrests. Reeves checked his watch. The raids start in 5 minutes. 17 simultaneous arrests across the base. Your documentation made this possible, Chen. You've potentially prevented a major security breach and saved lives. I kept a promise, Maya said simply. That's all. The butterfly on her wrist caught the light. Delicate wings rendered in permanent ink. A memorial to someone who died believing in her. A symbol of service that demanded no recognition. A reminder that real warriors often fight battles no one ever sees. What happens when the person everyone dismissed suddenly becomes the center of everything? When the weak become the strong, when the invisible become undeniable, when 3 months of silent suffering transform into vindication that no one saw coming. The arrests began at 800 hours. 17 individuals taken into custody simultaneously across Naval Base San Diego. Trainees, instructors, even 2 senior enlisted personnel who had been facilitating the network. The operation was executed with military precision. No one escaped. No evidence was destroyed. By 900 hours, Rodriguez was in handcuffs, his cold blue eyes filled with disbelief as NCIS agents read him his rights. Kowalski was next, pulled from a training exercise while his buddies watched in shock. One by one, the people who had spent 3 months mocking Maya Chen were led away in restraints, their careers destroyed, their freedom forfeited. And Maya stood in the warehouse. Surrounded by ammunition she had counted bullet by bullet, watching justice unfold with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had earned every moment of this vindication. Instructor Daniels arrived at the warehouse an hour later. His face was pale, his swagger gone. He stood in the doorway looking at Maya like he was seeing her for the first time. You, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, you were. Doing my job, Maya finished. Just like you told me to, I stayed at my desk. I did my paperwork. I didn't get in anyone's way. Daniel's jaw worked. I called you weak. I said you didn't belong here. You were entitled to your opinion, instructor. But I was wrong. The words seemed to cost him. I was completely, utterly wrong. Maya picked up her clipboard. With respect, Instructor Daniels, your assessment of me was never part of my mission parameters. I wasn't here to prove anything to you. I was here to identify traitors and protect this base. Your opinion, while noted, was ultimately irrelevant to that objective. The statement was delivered without malice. Pure fact. It somehow made the impact even more devastating. Daniels looked like he wanted to say more, but Captain Morrison appeared in the doorway. His expression was grave. "Petty Officer Chen, you're needed at headquarters. The base commander wants a full briefing." Maya nodded. She set down her clipboard for the final time, the battered metal suddenly feeling lighter than it had in 3 months. As she walked past Daniels, she paused. "The butterfly tattoo," she said quietly. "It represents Operation Neptune's Shadow, a mission where 7 operators went in and 6 came out alive. I was one of the 7. The coordinates are hidden in the wing pattern. If you had asked me about it instead of mocking it, I would have told you, but you never asked. You just assumed." She left him standing there, the weight of his assumptions crushing him more effectively than any argument could. The briefing at headquarters took 4 hours. Maya presented her findings to a room full of senior officers who had spent months completely unaware that an undercover intelligence operative was working beneath their noses. She detailed the network, explained the methodology, answered questions with the calm precision of someone who had lived every moment of the investigation. When she finished, the base commander stood. He was a stern man in his 60s, a career naval officer who had seen everything the military could throw at him, but even he seemed shaken. "Petty Officer Chen, on behalf of this command, I want to express our gratitude for your service. Your work here has potentially prevented a catastrophic security breach. Your dedication, your patience, your willingness to endure difficult circumstances. It exemplifies everything we claim to value in this military." He paused, seeming to struggle with the next words. "It also exposes failures in our culture, the way you were treated, the mockery you endured, the fact that talented warriors were belittled and dismissed based on appearance and assumptions rather than capability. That ends now. I've ordered a complete review of our training protocols and leadership standards. What happened to you will not happen to anyone else under my command." Maya stood at attention. "Permission to speak freely, sir." "Granted." "The treatment I experienced was necessary for the mission. I invited no sympathy then, and I require none now. But if the command genuinely wants to address cultural issues, focus on this. Warriors come in many forms. Some are loud and obvious. Others operate in silence. Some seek recognition. Others serve without it. The military is strongest when we value all forms of service, not just the ones that fit comfortable stereotypes." She touched the butterfly tattoo on her wrist. "I made a promise 5 years ago to a man who died believing I could accomplish the impossible. I've spent 5 years keeping that promise by doing work that no one saw and accepting treatment that tested my commitment daily. I don't regret a moment of it, but I hope the lesson here isn't just about me. It's about every person who has capabilities that don't match their appearance. Every warrior who serves in ways that don't earn medals or recognition. Every individual who chooses duty over comfort." The room was silent. These senior officers, accustomed to giving speeches rather than receiving them, sat listening to a junior enlisted sailor deliver a lesson in service that would echo through their consciences for years to come. The base commander nodded slowly. "Thank you, Petty Officer Chen, for everything." After the briefing, Maya returned to the ammunition warehouse one final time. Her replacement had already arrived, a young sailor who looked nervous and overwhelmed by the sudden attention the position had received. Maya spent an hour showing him the inventory procedures, the filing systems, the protocols that would keep him safe and effective. As she prepared to leave, she noticed something on the wall. The crude cartoon someone had drawn of a butterfly trying to lift a rifle had been covered with a new image. A butterfly rendered in careful detail, its wings spread wide, surrounding the words, "Real warriors serve in silence." Someone had recognized, someone had understood. That was enough. Maya walked out of the warehouse into the California sunshine. The heat hit her like a physical force, but she didn't flinch. She had endured far worse than uncomfortable weather. She had survived mockery that would have broken lesser people. She had maintained her cover while collecting evidence that destroyed 17 traitors. And she had kept her promise to a man who died believing she was capable of anything. A week later, Maya received new orders, not to another undercover assignment, but to a training position at the Navy's intelligence school. She would be teaching the next generation of intelligence operators the skills she had mastered through years of silent service. Her experience, her methods, her unwavering commitment to the mission would be passed down to others who would carry on the work in their own way. The assignment came with a promotion, the recognition she had never sought, the acknowledgement that she had earned through performance rather than self-promotion. But the real reward came 3 days before she was scheduled to leave San Diego. She was running her usual morning route when she noticed someone matching her pace, a man in his 40s, running with the controlled efficiency of someone who had spent decades maintaining peak physical condition. He didn't speak for the first mile, just ran alongside her, his breathing steady, his form perfect. Finally, as they reached the turnaround point, he spoke. Operation Neptune's Shadow. I was there. I was one of the 6 who made it out because you kept your promise to Davis. Maya stopped running. She turned to face him fully for the first time. His face was older now, worn by years of service, but she recognized him. Operator 3, the one who had taken a bullet to the shoulder during the extraction. You healed well, she said quietly. Because you got me out alive. He reached out and touched her butterfly tattoo gently, respectfully. We all got these, the 6 of us who survived. We wanted to honor Davis. We wanted to remember the promise you kept when everything went wrong and you refused to leave anyone behind. Maya's eyes stung. She blinked rapidly, maintaining control. I've spent 5 years wondering if you all made it, she said. If the extraction was worth what we sacrificed. We made it because of you. Every one of us went on to serve with honor. 2 are still active. 3 retired to families and careers. 1 became an instructor at SEAL training. All of us carry the memory of what you did. All of us know that when the world fell apart in Kandahar, there was one person who refused to quit. He pulled a coin from his pocket. Not a standard challenge coin, but something custom-made. A butterfly rendered in silver with coordinates engraved on the back. The same coordinates hidden in Maya's tattoo. From all of us, for everything you gave, for everything you continue to give. Maya took the coin. It was warm from his hand, solid and real in her palm. Physical proof that the sacrifice had mattered, that the promise had been kept. That silent service still meant something in a world that often valued noise over substance. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded once, then turned and ran back the way he had come, leaving Maya standing alone in the morning light, holding a piece of silver that represented years of service no one saw and commitment that required no audience. She looked down at the butterfly on her wrist, at the memorial to Davis, at the promise she had kept in Kandahar and every day since. Sometimes strength didn't announce itself. It didn't demand recognition or require validation. It simply existed, quiet and constant, doing what needed to be done regardless of who was watching. And sometimes the most powerful warriors were the ones who served in silence, endured without complaint, and proved their worth not through words, but through actions that spoke louder than any speech ever could. What happens when someone who spent years being invisible finally steps into the light? When recognition arrives for service that was never supposed to be acknowledged? When the warrior who operated in shadows must learn to function in the glare of attention she never wanted? The Navy's Intelligence Training Center occupied a sprawling complex in Virginia, far from the California base where Maya had spent 3 months being treated like furniture. Here, the atmosphere was different, focused, professional. The instructors were former intelligence operators who understood the unique demands of silent service. The students were carefully selected individuals who had demonstrated both aptitude and character. Maya arrived on a gray Monday morning, her belongings packed into 2 duffel bags and a small backpack. Everything she owned fit into that compact space. She had learned years ago that attachments to material things created vulnerabilities. The less you carried, the faster you could move when circumstances required it. Her new office was small but functional. A desk, a computer terminal with appropriate security clearances, a filing cabinet with a lock that actually worked. On the wall, someone had already hung a framed photograph of her class roster. 32 students ranging in age from early 20s to late 30s, all volunteers for the intelligence specialty, all about to be trained by someone who had lived the lessons she would teach. The first day of class began at 800 hours. Maya entered the classroom and found 32 pairs of eyes assessing her with varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism. She looked young for an instructor. Her small frame and quiet demeanor didn't match their preconceptions about what an intelligence professional should be. She could almost hear the questions they weren't asking. What made her qualified? What had she done to earn this position? Why should they listen to someone who barely looked old enough to be out of training herself? Maya set her materials on the desk and faced the class. She didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. My name is Petty Officer First Class Maya Chen. For the next 16 weeks, I will be responsible for teaching you the fundamentals of intelligence operations, surveillance techniques, and undercover work. I will not tell you war stories. I will not bore you with theory you could read in any manual. What I will give you is practical knowledge earned through operations you will never hear about in locations I cannot name. She pulled up her sleeve, exposing the butterfly tattoo. This represents a mission that officially never happened. 7 operators went in, 6 came out alive. I was one of the 7. The details are classified. What matters for your training is this. I survived and my teammates survived because we understood that intelligence work is not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the most patient, the most observant, the most willing to endure discomfort while others overlook you. She let the sleeve fall back into place. Some of you are here because you tested high on aptitude assessments. Some because you speak critical languages. Some because you demonstrated analytical skills that caught someone's attention. But intelligence work requires more than aptitude. It requires character. It requires the ability to be mocked, dismissed, and underestimated while maintaining your mission focus. It requires you to serve without recognition, operate without support, and succeed without ever being able to tell anyone about your achievements. A hand went up, a young sailor in the front row with earnest eyes and a determined expression. Yes, Chief, how do you maintain motivation when no one knows what you're doing? Maya considered the question. It was a good one, an honest one. You find purpose in the promise, not the praise. You remember why you took the oath. You focus on protecting people who will never know your name. And you accept that real service doesn't require an audience. It just requires commitment. Over the following weeks, Maya taught them everything she had learned through years of silent operations. How to maintain cover identities under pressure. How to spot behavioral anomalies that indicated security threats. How to document evidence without being detected. How to endure psychological stress while appearing completely normal. But the most important lessons weren't in the manuals. She taught them that underestimation was a weapon they could use, that appearing harmless made people careless around you, that quiet observation often revealed more than aggressive interrogation, that patience was more valuable than physical strength in most intelligence scenarios. She taught them by example, by demonstrating how someone small and quiet could control a room through presence rather than volume, how careful preparation mattered more than improvisation, how discipline in small things built the foundation for success in critical moments. The students responded. Some struggled initially with the concept of serving without recognition. Others embraced it immediately, recognizing that invisibility offered unique advantages in a world that increasingly demanded attention and validation. By week 8, Maya's class had the highest performance scores in the center's history. By week 12, other instructors were requesting to observe her teaching methods. By week 16, when her students graduated, they had been transformed from curious volunteers into disciplined intelligence professionals who understood that real strength often wore the mask of weakness. At the graduation ceremony, the base commander presented Maya with a commendation medal, not for the undercover work in San Diego that remained classified, not for Operation Neptune's Shadow that officially didn't exist, but for exceptional performance as an instructor, for developing training methods that would shape intelligence operations for years to come. Maya accepted the medal with appropriate professional courtesy. She shook hands. She smiled politely. She said the right things. But that night, alone in her quarters, she placed the medal in a drawer and didn't think about it again. What mattered wasn't the recognition. It was knowing that 32 new intelligence operators would carry forward the lessons she had learned through years of silent service, that they would serve with honor in shadows, where medals weren't awarded and sacrifices weren't acknowledged, that they understood real warriors didn't need their names in history books to know they had made a difference. 3 weeks after graduation, Maya received a phone call at 2300 hours. The number was blocked. The voice on the other end was one she hadn't heard in 5 years. "Chen, this is Commander Foster. We worked together on a classified project in Kandahar." Maya sat up immediately. Foster had been the mission coordinator for Neptune's Shadow, the one who had authorized the extraction, the one who had classified her identity to protect her ability to do future undercover work. "Yes, sir, I remember. I need to meet with you, tomorrow, 600 hours. Location will be sent via secure channel. This conversation is already above the classification level of your current position, so I'll be brief. There's a situation, historical, complicated, and you're the only person who can help us understand what actually happened." Maya's mind raced through possibilities. This is about Neptune's Shadow. Adjacent to it, related but separate, I can't say more on this line. "Understood, sir, I'll be there." The call disconnected. 60 seconds later, her encrypted phone received a text message with coordinates and a time. She memorized both, then deleted the message. The location was a safe house 40 minutes outside the base. She arrived at 5:45 hours, observing from a distance to ensure the site wasn't under surveillance before approaching. Old habits from undercover work. Always assume complications. Always verify safety before committing. Foster waited inside. He looked older than Maya remembered. More lines around his eyes, more gray in his hair. The weight of classified decisions aging him faster than time alone could manage. "Thank you for coming," he said. "What I'm about to tell you is classified at a level that technically exceeds your current clearance, but given your history with the operation, I've been authorized to read you in." He pulled out a tablet and showed Maya a photograph. 7 operators in combat gear standing in front of a nondescript building in Kandahar. She recognized herself immediately. Younger, harder. The version of Maya Chen who existed before 3 months of being mocked taught her that strength had many faces. Operation Neptune's Shadow. 7 in, 6 out. Lieutenant Commander Davis killed in action covering the extraction. Official after-action report lists 6 survivors who were recovered and debriefed. "Yes, sir, I was one of the 6. Foster's expression was grim. "That's what the official record says, but intelligence intercepts from the past month suggest something impossible. Someone matching Davis's description was spotted in 3 separate locations. Syria, Yemen, Pakistan, always in areas with significant intelligence value, always operating with apparent official sanction." Maya's blood ran cold. "That's not possible. I watched Davis die. I carried his body tags. I confirmed his death personally. I know, which is why this situation is classified above top secret. Because either our intelligence is wrong, or something happened in Kandahar that wasn't included in any official report. He showed her another photograph. Grainy, taken from long distance, but the face was unmistakable. Davis, or someone who looked exactly like him. I need you to tell me everything that happened during that extraction. Everything you saw, everything you remember. Because if Davis is alive, then either we faked his death for operational reasons no one told us about, or someone is using his identity for purposes we don't understand. Maya stared at the photograph, at a ghost that shouldn't exist, at a man she had mourned for 5 years who apparently might still be breathing. "I'll tell you everything I know," she said quietly. "But Commander, if what you're showing me is real, then everything I thought I knew about that mission might be wrong. And if my memories are incomplete or deliberately false, then we're not dealing with a simple intelligence failure. We're dealing with something much darker." Foster nodded grimly. "That's exactly what I'm afraid of, which is why I need someone I can trust absolutely. Someone who was there. Someone who has proven they can handle classified operations that officially don't exist." He paused, meeting her eyes directly. "Are you ready to go back into the shadows, Chen? Because this investigation might require you to become invisible again, to operate without support, to risk everything you've built for answers that might destroy you." Maya looked down at the butterfly tattoo on her wrist, at the promise she had kept for 5 years, at the memorial to a man who might not actually be dead. "I kept my promise once," she said quietly. "I'll keep it again. Whatever the truth is, I'll find it." Foster handed her a secure phone and a file folder. "Everything we have is in here. Study it, memorize it, then destroy it. You have 48 hours to decide if you're willing to take this assignment. If you accept, your teaching position ends and you disappear into a classified investigation that might last months or years. No recognition, no support if things go wrong, just you and whatever truth you can uncover." Maya took the folder. It was heavier than it should be, not from physical weight, but from the implications of what it contained. "I don't need 48 hours, sir. I made my decision the moment you showed me that photograph. If Davis is alive, I need to know why. If he's dead and someone is using his identity, I need to know who. Either way, the truth matters more than my comfort." Foster nodded slowly. "I knew you'd say that, which is why I already started the paperwork to transfer you to a classified duty station effective immediately." He stood, extending his hand. "Welcome back to the shadows, Chin. Try not to get lost in them this time." Maya shook his hand, feeling the weight of commitment settle over her shoulders like armor. She had spent 3 months being mocked in San Diego. She had spent 16 weeks teaching others to serve in silence. She had finally stepped into the light and received recognition for years of invisible service. And now she was choosing to step back into darkness. Because some promises couldn't be kept in the light. Some truths could only be found in shadows. And some warriors were called to serve in ways that denied them everything except the knowledge that they were doing what needed to be done. The butterfly on her wrist marked a promise to Davis. If he was alive, she would find him. If he was dead and someone was dishonoring his memory, she would stop them. Either way, the mission continued. It always did. That was the nature of service that never ended, performed by warriors whose names would never be recorded in history, but whose actions shaped the world in ways no one would ever fully understand. And Maya Chen had always been comfortable in the dark. What does it mean to keep searching for truth when every answer only creates more questions? When the dead refuse to stay buried? When the mission you thought was finished turns out to have been just the beginning? The file Commander Foster gave Maya contained 47 pages of intelligence reports, surveillance photographs, and analysis that contradicted everything she knew about what happened in Kandahar 5 years ago. She spent 2 days in a secure reading room, absorbing every detail, cross-referencing every claim, building a mental map of a situation that made less sense the more she understood it. Lieutenant Commander Davis had been killed during the extraction. Maya had been there. She had seen the bullets hit, had seen him fall, had heard his last words, "Get them out, keep your promise." She had kept that promise. All 6 surviving operators had been extracted. The intelligence materials had been destroyed. The mission had been officially classified as a tactical success despite the loss of 1 operator. But these photographs showed someone who looked exactly like Davis. Same build, same facial structure, same movement patterns, operating in locations that suggested active intelligence work rather than random civilian activity. Syria, 3 months ago. A grainy image captured by local surveillance showing a Western male meeting with a known information broker in Damascus. The man's face was partially obscured, but his posture, his hand gestures, his way of scanning his environment, Maya had seen Davis do all of those things hundreds of times during their training. Yemen, 6 weeks ago. Better image quality. A man matching Davis's description entering a compound known to house a CIA front company. The photograph captured his profile clearly enough that facial recognition software flagged it as a 73% match. Pakistan, 2 weeks ago. The clearest photograph yet. A Western male in local dress, speaking with someone Maya didn't recognize. The angle wasn't perfect, but his face was visible enough that Maya's certainty wavered between impossible and undeniable. Either Davis had survived and spent 5 years operating under deep cover without contacting any of his team, or someone was using his identity for purposes Maya couldn't begin to understand. She reviewed the official casualty report. Davis had been confirmed dead by 3 separate observers. His body had been recovered and transported to the medical examiner. His remains had been buried with full military honors. His family had been notified. But something nagged at Maya's memory, a detail she had suppressed because it didn't fit the official narrative. In the chaos of the extraction, she had grabbed Davis's identification tags. Standard procedure when recovering casualties under fire. But when she examined them later, safely back at base, one tag had been missing. She had assumed it was lost during the firefight. Combat was chaotic. Equipment got damaged or lost. It hadn't seemed significant at the time. But what if it wasn't lost? What if someone had taken it deliberately? What if the body she helped evacuate wasn't actually Davis? Maya closed the file and sat in the silence of the secure reading room, her mind working through possibilities that all felt equally impossible. Scenario 1. Davis had survived and entered deep cover for reasons classified beyond her access level. This would explain the sightings but required believing that he had let his team mourn him for 5 years without any contact. Scenario 2. Someone was impersonating Davis using his identity for intelligence work. This required access to his biometric data, his operational history, his personal mannerisms, information that should be locked in the most secure databases in the world. Scenario 3. The body recovered in Kandahar wasn't Davis, and he had been operating independently ever since. This required the most elaborate deception, but it was the only scenario that explained why his family had been notified of his death, while someone matching his description continued active operations. Each scenario created more questions than it answered. Each required believing in conspiracies that stretched the limits of plausibility. Each suggested that Maya's understanding of what happened in Kandahar was fundamentally incomplete. She made her decision. She would accept the assignment. She would investigate these sightings. She would find the truth whatever it cost. That night, Maya packed her minimal belongings and prepared for deployment to a classified location where she would begin the investigation. The teaching position ended. The recognition she had finally received disappeared back into shadows. The comfortable life she had started building dissolved like morning fog. She was returning to the work that had defined her for years, silent, invisible, operating without support in situations where failure meant more than professional consequences. But as she stood in her empty quarters, looking at the few possessions she was leaving behind, Maya felt something unexpected. Relief. The recognition had been nice. The teaching had been meaningful, but operating in the light had never felt natural to her. She was built for shadows, trained for silence, most effective when people underestimated her capabilities and overlooked her presence. Going back to undercover work felt like coming home. The next morning, Maya boarded a military transport headed to an airbase in Germany. From there, she would be deployed to the Middle East under civilian cover. Her identity would be that of an academic researcher studying regional development. Her real mission was to track down the person appearing in those photographs and determine whether they were Davis, an imposter, or something she hadn't yet imagined. She carried no military identification, no weapons, no emergency contact numbers. If something went wrong, she would be completely alone with no official support and no acknowledgement of her actual affiliation. Just like every other deep cover operation she had run. The flight took 14 hours. Maya used the time to review her cover identity until it became second nature. She memorized the academic credentials, the research project details, the professional contacts who existed only on paper but whose backstories had been meticulously constructed by intelligence professionals. By the time the plane landed, Maya Chen, the naval intelligence instructor, had disappeared completely. Dr. Sarah Martinez, academic researcher with a focus on post-conflict economic development, had taken her place. The transformation was so complete that, when she cleared customs in Frankfurt, even she almost believed the fiction. 3 days later, she was in Jordan, working out of a small office in a development organization that served as cover for intelligence operations. Her handler was a CIA officer named Catherine Ross, a woman in her 50s who had spent 3 decades running agents in the Middle East. Ross was direct, efficient, and completely unsentimental about the work. The sightings pattern suggests your target is operating on a predictable schedule. Syria every 8 weeks, Yemen every 6 weeks, Pakistan alternating with other locations we haven't identified yet. We believe the next appearance will be in Turkey, probably Ankara or Istanbul, within the next 10 days. Maya studied the map Ross had spread across the desk. What's the operational objective? Are we making contact or just confirming identity? Initially, just confirmation. We need to know who this person actually is before we decide how to proceed. If it's Davis and he's operating under official cover, making contact could compromise whatever mission he's running. If it's an imposter, we need to understand who's running them and why before we expose the deception. And if I confirm it's Davis, Ross's expression was carefully neutral. Then we have bigger problems than you're cleared to know about, but that's above your pay grade. Your job is simple observation and identification. Document everything. Report what you see. Don't attempt contact unless specifically authorized. Understood. Ross handed Maya a small device that looked like a standard smartphone but contained sophisticated surveillance equipment. Camera is high resolution. Audio recording is directional up to 30 meters. Transmission is encrypted through 3 separate routing protocols. If you're compromised, the device has a remote wipe that will activate automatically. Maya took the phone and slipped it into her bag. Support network. Minimal. You have 3 emergency contacts if things go catastrophically wrong. Otherwise, you're operating independently. No check-ins unless you have critical intelligence to report. The cover organization will provide basic logistical support, but they're not read into the actual operation. It was the standard protocol for deep cover work. Maximum deniability, minimum support. complete reliance on the operator's judgment and capability. Maya had done this before. She could do it again. Any particular reason I was selected for this assignment, instead of someone with more regional experience? Ross studied her for a long moment before answering. You were there in Kandahar. You knew Davis personally. You're the only person who can make a definitive identification from close observation. And according to your file, you have a remarkable ability to maintain cover under pressure while collecting intelligence that others miss. She paused. Also, you kept your promise to Davis once before. Commander Foster believes you'll keep it again, even if the truth turns out to be something no one wants to discover. Maya met her eyes. I will. I believe you, which is why I'm going to say something off the record. Ross leaned forward slightly. This investigation is more complicated than you've been told. There are people in the intelligence community who don't want these questions asked, who believe that whatever happened in Kandahar should stay buried. If you find something that contradicts official records, you're going to face pressure to walk away and forget what you learned. Are you telling me to give up if things get difficult? No, I'm telling you that keeping your promise to Davis might require you to fight your own chain of command. Are you prepared for that? Maya thought about 3 months of being mocked while investigating traitors, about years of operating in silence while everyone around her assumed she was harmless, about choosing service over comfort, mission over recognition, truth over convenient lies. I've fought harder battles with less support, she said quietly. I'll do what needs to be done. Ross nodded, apparently satisfied. Good. Your flight to Istanbul leaves tomorrow at 900. Your cover identity is already established with the regional office. They think you're there to study economic development projects. Reality is, you're hunting a ghost that might be alive and might be the key to understanding what really happened in Kandahar. She stood, signaling the briefing was over. One last thing, Chen. Davis was a good operator. If he is alive and he's been hiding for 5 years, there's a reason. Don't assume that reason is benign just because you respected him. People change. Missions go wrong. And sometimes the person you knew turns out to be someone completely different than you believed. I'll keep that in mind. See that you do. I've lost too many agents who couldn't accept that the person they were looking for had become someone they shouldn't trust. Maya left the meeting with her mind churning through possibilities and implications. She spent the rest of the day preparing her cover identity, memorizing the details of research projects she would supposedly be investigating, making contact with the development organization that would provide her credentials. That night, alone in a hotel room that smelled like disinfectant and stale cigarettes, she looked at the butterfly tattoo on her wrist one more time. She had kept her promise to Davis by extracting 6 operators from Kandahar. She had kept it by serving with honor in operations that would never be acknowledged. She had kept it by teaching others to operate with the same commitment to silent service. Now she would keep it again by finding the truth about what happened to him. Whether that truth brought vindication or heartbreak, whether it confirmed his death or revealed his betrayal, whether it destroyed her faith in everything she thought she knew or validated years of sacrifice. The promise demanded nothing less than complete commitment to discovering what was real, regardless of the cost. And Maya Chen had never broken a promise. Not in Kandahar, not during 3 months of being mocked in San Diego, not in 5 years of serving in shadows. She wouldn't start now. The investigation had begun. The hunt for truth had started. The mission that should have ended 5 years ago was continuing in ways no one had anticipated. And somewhere in the shadows between what was reported and what actually happened, the answer waited for someone brave enough to find it. Maya closed her eyes and slept the dreamless sleep of someone who had accepted that comfort was temporary, recognition was fleeting, and the only thing that mattered was keeping promises to the dead, or to the living who everyone believed were dead. Time would reveal which truth applied to Davis. How do you hunt a ghost when everyone insists the ghost should stay buried? When every step toward truth takes you deeper into darkness? When the mission to find answers might reveal secrets that were meant to stay hidden forever? Istanbul hit Maya like a wave of sensation the moment she stepped off the plane. The call to prayer echoing across the city. The smell of spices and exhaust and sea air mixing into something uniquely Turkish. The chaos of a metropolis that existed at the crossroads between Europe and Asia, ancient and modern, tradition and transformation. Dr. Sarah Martinez, her cover identity, had supposedly been here twice before for research projects. Maya moved through the airport with the confidence of someone familiar with the city, navigating customs with practiced ease, taking a taxi to a modest hotel in the Beyoğlu district, where academics on limited budgets typically stayed. She checked in, unpacked her minimal luggage, activated the surveillance phone and ran diagnostics to ensure all systems were functioning properly. Then she sat by the window overlooking the street and waited. Intelligence work was 90% patience, waiting for patterns to emerge, waiting for targets to appear, waiting for the moment when observation transformed into actionable intelligence. The pattern Ross had identified suggested her target would appear somewhere in Istanbul within the next 10 days, probably at one of three locations: a cafe near the Galata Tower frequented by intelligence operatives posing as tourists, a bookstore in Karakuri known to be a meeting point for information exchange, or a restaurant in Sultanahmet where off-the-books negotiations sometimes occurred. Maya established surveillance routines for all three locations. She spent her days photographing architectural details supposedly for her research, while actually documenting everyone who entered and exited the target locations. She spent her evenings reviewing the images, cross-referencing faces against databases of known intelligence operatives, building pattern maps that might reveal surveillance teams or hostile watchers. 5 days passed with no sign of her target. Maya used the time to refine her cover, making contact with actual development professionals, attending academic functions, establishing a presence that would withstand scrutiny if anyone investigated her credentials. On the 6th day, everything changed. Maya was sitting in the cafe near Galata Tower, supposedly reading academic papers on economic development while actually monitoring the entrance through her peripheral vision. The morning crowd was typical: tourists taking photographs, locals grabbing coffee before work, street vendors hawking souvenirs with aggressive enthusiasm. Then she saw him. He entered the cafe with the casual confidence of someone who belonged. Western male, approximately 6 feet tall, brown hair going gray at the temples. He wore local clothing, jeans, a leather jacket, a scarf wrapped in the Turkish style. He ordered coffee in fluent Turkish with no trace of an American accent. But his movements were unmistakable. The way he scanned the room before sitting, the way he positioned himself with his back to the wall and clear sight lines to both exits, the way his hands remained visible and loose, ready to respond to threats. Maya had seen Davis move exactly that way hundreds of times during their training. She didn't react, didn't stare, didn't reach for her surveillance phone. She continued reading her papers, appearing completely absorbed in academic minutiae while her mind calculated distance, angles, optimal positioning for photographic documentation. The man sat 3 tables away, close enough for clear observation, far enough to avoid appearing connected. He pulled out a tablet and began reading something that made him frown occasionally. Maya waited 5 minutes, then casually reached for her phone as if checking messages. The camera was already active, recording in high resolution without any visible indication. She held the phone at an angle that appeared random but actually captured perfect facial documentation from multiple angles. 15 seconds. That was all she needed. 15 seconds of clear footage that would allow facial recognition analysis to provide definitive identification. She got 20 seconds before the man glanced in her direction. Their eyes met for a fraction of a moment, not long enough to be meaningful, just the random eye contact that happens in crowded cafes when people's gazes happen to intersect. But something flickered in his expression: recognition, suspicion, calculation. Maya looked away immediately, returning her attention to her papers with the casual disinterest of someone who had accidentally made brief eye contact with a stranger. Her heart was pounding, not from fear but from the surge of adrenaline that came with potential exposure. Had he recognized her? Did he know who she was? Was her cover already compromised? She forced her breathing to remain steady, forced her hands to remain still on her papers, forced herself to project the absolute calm of someone who had nothing to hide and no reason for concern. 10 minutes passed. The man finished his coffee and left without looking in her direction again. Maya waited 15 minutes more, then paid her bill and exited in the opposite direction. She didn't follow him, didn't attempt to track his movements. That wasn't the mission. The mission was identification and documentation, nothing more. She returned to her hotel and transferred the footage to a secure server, using encryption protocols that would take a nation-state-level intelligence agency months to crack. Then she sent a brief message through the emergency contact system. Target acquired, visual confirmation pending analysis, awaiting further instructions. The response came back within an hour. Upload all documentation, maintain current cover, do not attempt recontact. Analysis will take 48 hours. Maya spent those 48 hours continuing her academic cover activities. She attended conferences. She interviewed local development workers. She wrote detailed notes about economic projects that she would never actually compile into research. And she thought about that moment of eye contact in the cafe, about whether Davis, if that had actually been Davis, had recognized her, about what it meant that he hadn't made contact even if he had. 5 years of believing he was dead. 5 years of carrying the guilt that she had survived while he didn't. 5 years of keeping a promise to a man who might have been alive the entire time. If it was him, why had he stayed hidden? What mission could require that level of deception? What truth was so dangerous that it required his own team to believe he was dead? The response to her documentation arrived exactly 48 hours after she sent it. Facial recognition analysis complete. Match confirmed at 94% certainty. Target is identified as Lieutenant Commander Thomas Davis, presumed KIA in Kandahar 5 years ago. Authorization granted for limited contact. Objective: determine operational status and verify loyalty. Extreme caution advised. Do not assume friendly intent. Maya read the message 3 times before it fully registered. Davis was alive. The man she had mourned. The operator whose death had driven her to keep promises that defined her entire career. The warrior whose memorial she carried on her wrist in permanent ink. He was alive, and he had let everyone believe otherwise for 5 years. The question was why, and whether the answer would validate her faith or destroy it completely. She had authorization for contact now, but contact required planning, preparation, understanding of the situation and risks involved. She couldn't just approach him directly without knowing whether he was operating under official cover or if he had gone rogue, whether he was still the person she had known or if 5 years of deception had transformed him into someone else entirely. Maya spent the next 3 days establishing surveillance patterns around the locations where Davis had appeared. She documented his routines, his meeting locations, his operational security protocols. He was careful, professional, following tradecraft that suggested active intelligence work rather than someone in hiding. He met with at least 4 different individuals during those 3 days, each contact brief and seemingly casual, but executed with precision that indicated coordination. On the 4th day, Maya made her decision. She would make contact, but not directly, not in a way that could compromise whatever operation he was running or put either of them at risk if hostile elements were watching. She wrote a note on a piece of paper using a cipher she and Davis had developed during their training, a simple substitution code that would be meaningless to anyone who didn't know the key. The message was brief. Butterfly remembers the promise. Need to understand why the dead still walk. She went to the cafe near Galata Tower at the time Davis typically appeared. She ordered coffee. She sat at the table where she had photographed him 4 days earlier, and she waited. He arrived exactly on schedule, ordered his coffee in fluent Turkish, sat at his usual table with his back to the wall and clear sight lines to the exits. Maya stood, left exact change for her coffee, and walked past his table on her way out. As she passed, she dropped the note next to his cup without breaking stride or making eye contact. She was 3 blocks away before she allowed herself to breathe normally. Either he would recognize the cipher and understand the message, or he would dismiss it as random trash and her attempt at contact would fail. Either he would respond, or he would disappear even deeper into whatever shadows he was operating in. Maya returned to her hotel and waited. 6 hours later, her phone received a text message from an unknown number. Green Mosque, sunset tomorrow, come alone, don't trust anyone. She deleted the message immediately, but the words burned into her memory with absolute clarity. Davis was alive. He was willing to meet, and whatever truth he was protecting, it was dangerous enough that he warned her against trusting anyone, even her own chain of command. Maya looked at the butterfly on her wrist, at the promise she had kept for 5 years, at the memorial to a man who apparently hadn't needed memorializing at all. Tomorrow she would get answers. Tomorrow she would learn why Davis had let his team mourn him. Tomorrow she would discover what truth was so dangerous it required his death to be faked. And tomorrow she might learn that keeping promises sometimes meant accepting that everything you believed was a carefully constructed lie. The mission continued. It always did. But now Maya understood that the real mission had never been about rescuing operators from Kandahar or investigating traitors in San Diego or teaching the next generation of intelligence professionals. The real mission had always been about learning to serve in darkness, while accepting that darkness sometimes hid truths that were more painful than any physical wound, and that some promises, once kept, could never truly be fulfilled because the people you made them to had become someone else entirely. The butterfly on her wrist had marked a memorial to the dead. Now it would mark something else, a reminder that in the shadows where real warriors operated, death itself was sometimes just another cover identity. And the truth was always more complicated than anyone wanted to believe.